So these are for today's agenda. So for my session, I will be sharing some inputs in terms of where do we begin in terms of research framework. And then in order for you to start with your research framework, you need to be able to understand what are the basic terms in research. For example, theory, model, concepts, and so on, because this is very important, because while you're reading in the literature review, all these kind of basic terms is always keep coming, and you need to be really assured what are the differences between those basic terms in research. And also we will see in terms of where does this research framework will fit in, and we see in terms of the terminology of research framework and the differences between conceptual framework and theoretical framework. Okay, and then we will see in terms of the steps, okay, in developing a research framework, so it can be applied for your conceptual framework as well as theoretical framework. And then by end of the session, you'll be able to know what are the differences between conceptual and theoretical framework and what are the advantages. So that are basically the contents that will be I'll share with you for this less than 1 hour. Here, the most challenging part uh, in research, most students say that data analysis as well as the research framework. Now I can see that the research framework keep on changing. Yeah, just a second. Literature review. So the literature review research framework shows the biggest challenge among the postgraduate students. All right. So now, as what we can see from the short Q&A just now, it shows that the most challenging part for students, I think, is articulating your literature review, where when you are reading, you need to be able to understand what exactly the studies is all about, what have been measured before this, what are the gaps, for example. So because this is a fundamental part where you need to understand what are the gaps by if you're able to construct, or sorry, if you're able to justify your problem statement, it will lead you to your constructing your research objective as well as the research questions, right? And then from there, it will lead you to construct your research framework. So normally the students, they have some idea in the head, but they don't know how to translate it in a how do I say, visualize the idea in a very simplest way. So research framework, either conceptual framework or theoretical framework, is like within one page you can show this is how you are going to conduct the research. Okay, so I will share with you how are you going to begin and how are you going to locate a research framework. Okay, now if you look here, the research process, right? Although the chapter one normally will give some overview, and then your research, justify your problem statements, and then your research objective and research questions or hypothesis, and then what are the significance of your research, and then you move on to your chapter two, which is more detailed on your literature review. And at that section, at that chapter, you will be articulating what have been discussed in the scope of your studies. And then at the end of chapter two, you should be able to design, to develop your research framework, right? So it is like in the middle, number four, okay, before you begin with your methodology chapter. Okay, however, in research, we have two approaches, which is inductive and deductive, right? So, for example, those who are doing inductive approach, which is more towards qualitative, uh, sometimes not necessary that you should provide your research framework here at number 4. Okay, if you are using a grounded theory, okay, there's no theories that are being explored yet. You are the one who start to explore, and at the end, by examining your responses, analysis of your data, you able to develop a new theory or a new model. So it turned into like at after analysis and finding. All right. So it depends on situation. All right. So if you are doing quantitative approach, so these are more towards deductive. Okay. So in deductive, you are deducing a theory. So there is an existing theory that you probably adopt and adapt. Might be you combine a few theory, and then from there you try to test this theory, okay, in terms of the relationship and so on, and then you can have that research framework here at number 4. Okay, and the normal process is you have to revisit every chapters actually. So of course you have to revisit again your research framework, okay, to modify and to make it much more clearer. All right, so that is basically the process and where you should position your research framework. But I like also to how do I say, to share with you, not necessarily all research should have research framework. For example, those students who are doing experiments, they have a very specific research question and research objective where they can easily measure using I don't know, formula or something. So by looking at this, it is not necessary all research should have research framework. So, but normally in social sciences, you should able to have develop your research framework, right? So now, so these are the one that I mentioned, the deductive versus inductive. So if you deduce a theory, it means that you are relying on some theories, okay? And from there, you develop your instrument, for example, the survey questionnaire, and then you will do your analysis part, okay, and then to see what are your results. So this is deductive, while inductive is the other way around, especially for grounded theory. You will start with your data collection first. So you start with exploring, and then when you get the responses, you will do, like, for example, content analysis or thematic analysis, and then you can form a new theory or a new model. So this is what we call inductive. I think most of you already know what are the differences between deductive and inductive. All right. So yeah, basic terms in research. Uh, it is important to understand the differences because although you are doing qualitative or quantitative, okay, because when you are reading in the literature review, there are many approaches. Although you have intention to conduct, for example, you have the intention to conduct qualitative methods, but you still have to understand the approach of quantitative, because you will have the process of reading all the materials, all the publication work, in the literature review, or else you don't understand anything and you can't really articulate. So that is the reason why you need to really understand what are the basic terms in research. So now it shows here, according to Silverman, uh, model, it means that overall framework in order to investigate at a reality, situation, or phenomenon. Okay, it means that overall you can see like a process, for example. And then, however, the concept is actually an idea, just an abstract, an idea from a given model. So it is like a subset from a model. And then a theory is a set of concepts which is used to define or explain some phenomenon, or the subset context of situation explained in the chosen model. So after this, I will show you how um, the analogy of those things, model, concept, and theory. Yeah, and other things is hypothesis. Okay, I think most of you know what is hypothesis. So it is like a proposition. So and with this proposition, you can do your testing. All right. And then the methodology, you know already, it is in chapter 3. So it means a general approach to studying the research topic. So it can be explanatory or exploratory. So in this context, it includes methods, includes your approaches, your instruments in your data collection. So methods is actually a specific research technique. Okay, for example, face-to-face survey or self-administered survey and so on. And then the instrument is the tool that you will be using to measure uh, your research objective that you already set, or research questions or hypothesis. All right. Okay, the analogy that I mentioned just now. So the concept is actually very abstract, but it can't really be explained. But from the concept, it will theories. Okay, now theory is actually arranged sets of concepts to define and explain some phenomenon. And normally the theory explains specifically on the relationship between variables, okay, and which is derived from the concept or the set of concept. Okay, I hope that you understand between those two. Okay, concept is just an abstract an idea, but theory is actually a combination of one concept or two concepts, and it's always relate to the relationship, the variables, and so on. Well, the model is actually represent the overall framework. So that is basically the differences between uh, concept, theory, and model. And methodology is how are you going to operationalize your how do I say your research framework. Okay, what are the tools that will be used? What are the methods that will be adopted in your research? So where does the conceptual framework fit in? So these are the key things that you need to really understand. Just now, Dr. Erna have shared with you what is the research problem. Okay, you need to be able to identify and justify, especially in your chapter 1. So it's normally associated to theoretical or practical interest. Probably you have your own observation of the current situation, and that current situation have not been explored by other researchers yet. So but then I also like to uh, emphasize that okay, in research it is not like you have your own way of doing things. Okay, it is like some students, like they think that this is what I want to do, and this is what my research objective, and I will do it my way. So you supposedly, when you understand what exactly the issue and you want to investigate, you should relate to fundamental in terms of any theories that can support your idea. All right. So, and then the paradigm. This is more to the philosophical assumption, where normally it's about understanding how do you uh, view in terms of nature of the world, or how do you want to understand it. And then aims and objective um, is the target, is how are you going to measure, how are you going to investigate. And actually from the aims we can already connect to your research framework. So and in literature review, it is not like up here and there what have been mentioned by other scholars. It's supposed to be there is a narrative way in telling a story in your literature review chapter. So it need to be articulated. It need to be uh, you need to have your own judgment. You need to have your critical thinking and how do you see things. So this is important part in chapter 2. And by end of chapter 2, I would suggest you to have your conceptual framework because it will lead to chapter 3, the methodology chapter. All right. And then research question is specific question that require answers. For example, if you have 5 or 6 research questions or 4 research questions, you have 3 research objective. But it depends on situation. Probably you have 2 research questions to answer 1 research objective. So it must be tailored. It must be linked. And then the data collection analysis, that is the other process. After this, I think we have another speaker that will be sharing with you in terms of the methodology. I will not touch about that. Okay, so that is all about it. So it means that this is very fundamental part and it is very important for those for PhD students who are going to um, present their research proposal. So we need to understand you have the ability to see things and construct your idea, and then if you're able to defend that, so it shows that you are ready to go for your data collection. So this is actually the terminology of research framework. So it means a written or visual presentation that explain either graphically or in a narrative form the main things to be studied. So, for example, the key factors or the concepts or the variables. And according to these two scholars, it means the presumed relationship among them, probably among the key concept or among the variables. Any questions? Um, okay. Mm, the differences between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. So theoretical framework, you can't get it from your how do I say from a literature review, because in research it need to be unique, it need to be something where you don't replicate A to Z, right? But you can adopt with some modification, especially for PhD level, because at PhD level, you need to show the originality of your work. You need to show the contribution, the added value to the knowledge. So that's why maybe for master's level, you can adopt the same framework, but then apply in other place. I think that is acceptable. But then for PhD level, you need to be more constructive, be more critical in formulating a research framework. Okay, so and also it shows the relationship between variables which are known based on many theories or one or 2 concepts and so on, and it serves as a guide to systematically identify the logical, precisely define a relationship among the variables. So according to this scholar, he said that the theoretical framework is the foundation from which all knowledge is constructed for a research study, and it serves as a structure and support for the rationale for the study and the problem statement, the purpose, the significance, and the research question. So as I mentioned just now, it linked to the idea from the start, from a problem statement to your research objective and research questions, and those things will link to your research methodology, because normally when we see your research framework, we know already how are you going to assess or to examine or to investigate the relationship. We know already what are you going to be testing. So that's why it is important, this theoretical framework, because it will provide a grounding base or an anchor for literature review, which importantly for the method and also analysis. Okay, so these are the steps, okay, for developing your research framework. So firstly, you need to explore and also explain the relationship between concept or a model. I will show you after this how can we merge two different concepts to put in together, right? So the concept and the relationship that are used to represent the phenomenon or what is happening and why. So you need to be able to explore and explain a few concepts that we try to visualize. And in order for you to understand that, of course, you really need to understand what is the concept, what is the theory that lies behind it. So the extensive reviewing the literature review will lead to understanding the relationship between concept or a model to the research subject. Okay, and then, okay, I'm sorry, this is not correct. Number two is actually define the concept, not identify the concept, and then you define the concept, and then you operationalize the concept. I think there's somewhere I have change it just now. Okay, so number two is supposedly to identify the concept and then define the concept and operationalize the concept. But I'll show you the example. I think it is much more easier to understand. Okay, now framing the model, theories, and concept. Example that I would like to share here is actually this is the work from my master students, mixed mode, okay, MSc Tourism Development before this. So what she's trying to suggest or to suggest is actually uh, for example, in tourism, there are a new things is happening. For example, agritourism, because before this, the tourists are not attracted to towards agriculture, for example. So now they have this kind of agritourism, for example. So now, in terms of knowledge management, okay, this is figure 2.1. If you can see, that shows the process of knowledge management. Okay, from the start, knowledge capture, knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, knowledge application, innovation towards knowledge creation. But she wants to see in terms of the knowledge transfer, okay, among the farmers, okay, because we know that the farmers, they don't have the ability or they don't have any knowledge in tourism hospitality. So this student trying to understand how these two sector intersect together. So she trying to see only on knowledge transfer. Okay, so the knowledge transfer normally need to have a medium from a sender to the modes of transferring to the receiver. So this is the first stage. For example, you need to explore and you need to explain the relationship and try to capture that. And then step two. Now she tried to see the two concepts, which is absorptive capacity model and also agriculture extension model. So both model is from a different sector, okay, apply for different sector. For example, the transfer knowledge for tourism, tourism, hospitality, or in other sector, they normally use this model. However, for scientific knowledge, especially agriculture, they use knowledge transfer model on agricultural extension model, which was established in 1985. So you see the process where, although the same thing, knowledge transfer from different sector, they have a different process. For example, in scientific knowledge, so it start with awareness, interest, and then evaluate, trial, adoption, and then the receiver is to the farmers. So this probably will be conducted by scientists. For example, what are the best solution to, for example, the durian kacuk kan panggil apa in order to formulate a new invention for for in agriculture, for example, and then they will do the scientific research, and then when they get the result, they will share to the farmers. So this is what we call the transfer knowledge. But then in other aspect in tourism, it is totally different. For example, here you can see that you can see that from tourism knowledge where the standard, for example, here external knowledge, then reconnection, and then they assimilate to the environment, for example, they apply, and then the receiver to the tourism operators. So now these students trying to merge two together. Okay, so it shows that the two concept. So define the concept. So now you can see that here is KT, knowledge transfer on absorptive capacity, and this is the knowledge transfer on agriculture extension. So she tried to merge these two things and try to explore the process of transfer knowledge among the farmers in Orchard. The case study is in Penang. So she is actually doing qualitative research. So by having this kind of theory, so she tried to understand the process, and at the end of the findings, she able to formulate a new theory or a new model. So this is already like 5 years ago. I can't really remember the output, but this is how the process of articulating and also capturing the model and combine or merge it together. So it is your own idea, and how do you formulate things. So this is what we call conceptual framework, right? So you can't see the variables, right, for this conceptual framework because it is much more abstract. Okay, because for qualitative, you don't have a very definite A towards B, for example. You will be exploring. So that's why conceptual framework are much more suitable for qualitative methods, right? So now okay, this I think most of you know already what are the differences between independent variables and dependent variables. I will not explain further because I think most of you understand, but this is just a notes that I hope that although qualitative researcher they don't think that they will apply this, but you need to understand because when you read in the literature review, there are all these technology, the findings. So at least you get some idea what exactly these scholar are trying to portray or try to deliver. Um, okay, and then yeah, moderator between what are the moderator and mediator. So moderator is actually will how do I say, it will influence the strength of a relationship. Okay, but a mediator, it like a time series, it will go from A to B to C. Okay, independent variable towards outcome variable. So these are the mediator variables. Okay, and developing a theoretical framework. Okay, I'll show you just an example based on publication in the research. I'll take one example. Uh, okay, the thing is the same process, the 4 steps that I mentioned just now. So now I'm trying to show you the example of this scholar where he tried to see in terms of um, the impact of economy sharing, what we call example Airbnb. So we know that this economy sharing is happening now. For example, Grab, Airbnb, and so on, and it would give more opportunity for people to how do I say, to have this kind of business. It open up more opportunities. However, there will be impact to tourism and hospitality industry as well as to the neighborhood, for example. And these scholars are actually looking in terms of the theory, reason, action, where how do the customer make decision? Okay, she combined together. I don't know, he or she combined together theory of reason, action, and theory of planned behavior. Okay, and then by articulating what are the theories behind it, so they, of course, there must be some limitation, and in order to fill in the gap. So she trying uh, to how do I say, to consider other aspect, in the decision making. For example, perceived risk. So now I'll show you example. All right. Identify the concept of theory model. So she identified a few concept, a few model that is related to the scope of study. So here it shows that the theory of reason action. So you can see already what are the variables. Okay, for example, in belief, attitudes, intention, and behavior. That is the whole process, and those are will tell you what are the beliefs of the outcome of the behavior, and then the theory of planned behavior. They have a subjective norm, attitudes, and perceived control, behavioral control, intention towards the behavior. This is quite similar, but then only the theory of reason action, they have a belief, and also emotion, I think. All right, so now this scholar try to inject some idea about perceived risk, because the customer who don't have any experience probably will feel fear to make decision or their behavioral intention. So this is how this scholar merge together between two theory together with the perceived risk. So this is like originality of the work. So this is what the student have to do. Okay, formulating your research framework. So when you be able to formulate your idea, then you see the relationship and you'll be able to construct your hypothesis. All right, so I will not explain about this because my intention is to show you the way how is the process of formulating your research framework. Right. In we are nearing towards the end now. So what are the advantages of establishing a research framework? Firstly, it will create a systematic, arranged and summarized and recorded study for your research work in an objective manner. Okay, and secondly, for theoretical framework in quantitative study, it developed a very specific testable hypothesis that derive from a theory, and the hypothesis then should be empirically testable, because we do if you have this research framework, it's easy for you to move on to the next stage for your data collection. If you don't have any uh, theory behind your research, by the end it is like rubbish in rubbish out. So it is very important for you to develop your research framework and then analyze the data by determining the standard of statistical techniques and interpret the result using the guidelines of the scientific method. So the differences between those two, conceptual framework versus theoretical framework. So conceptual framework are more the researcher idea on how the research problem will be explored, because we know that the conceptual framework can be applied more towards qualitative or, for example, mixed method. But a theoretical framework is more towards general representation of the relationship between indicators in a phenomenon. And when we don't have any existing theory to fit in the concept, researcher wish to study, then this conceptual framework can be used. Okay, and then for theoretical framework, normally it provides a broad explanation of relationship that exists between concept. So normally conceptual framework are not detailed as theoretical framework. Okay, and other things is uh, okay, conceptual are fluid because it's abstract, so the idea shift from time to time, and then this more topical about your problem or idea. It may include theories, observation, and so on. So, but theoretical are much more solid. Okay, the purpose is to understand and explain the relationship between the concept. So, I think that's all about it. So, in summary, uh, to establishing the conceptual framework is synonym like an architect. You know, when you want to build or a blueprint, as you want to develop the structure of your house, you need to have the plans, right? The structural plans. So the materials for foundation for the house are the literature review, right? So that is very important. And also the concept and theories. While the frame and connection are the relationship and the causal effect. So that is basically about research framework. So as a recap, first, of course, you need to understand the basic terms in research, and then you need to be able to understand where you should position your research framework. Is it inductive or deductive? Okay, if it is deduced, it means that in the middle. But if it is inductive approach, you can formulate your research, okay, a framework at the end. That is like your end product, a new theory. And then the differences between those two. Conceptual framework is more fluid and general idea, while theoretical framework explain the relationship between variables. And last one is the steps in formulating your research framework. So first you need to explore and explain between the concept. Number two, identify the concept. Number three, you define the concept. And lastly, you try to operationalize the concept.